In news that should surprise absolutely nobody, the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz and the fuel crisis that it has created has led to an explosion in electric vehicle sales. Fuel price go up, motorist happiness go down. However, there's more depth to the data than just that. So let's dig into the numbers and see what other trend lines are appearing. Alright, so since the USA and Israel decided to ruin the global energy market by attacking Iran, fuel is now going for bonkers money, and regular people are very clearly unhappy about that. The attack on Iran began at the very end of February, and fuel prices have skyrocketed across March, with diesel still stuck well above $3 a litre almost everywhere, and petrol sitting around $2.20 at the time I write this. Now, those who have the means have decided to pull forward plans to purchase a more fuel-efficient vehicle to help insulate themselves from this price pain. And the biggest jump for a single vehicle type has been for electric vehicles. Again, this should surprise absolutely none of you. But now the data is out there and we can see exactly how much of a demand spike this has created. Sales data for the full month of March has been released, and in that month nearly 16,000 new EVs were delivered. That's hugely significant, as it represents about 14.6% of all new cars delivered in March, and is creeping up on the market share of conventional hybrids. In fact, it exceeds the market share of conventional hybrids for the month of February. For context, in recent years, besides the occasional anomaly, EV sales typically only account for around 7 to 11% of new car sales per month. The car industry was not expecting huge growth in that number so soon. So that's all very interesting, but what else do the numbers tell us? To help visualize this data, I charted sales over the past 13 months of all vehicles sold in Australia according to their fuel type. At the top, petrol and diesel are still dominant. And what's interesting is that while their sales volume is indeed lower than where it was in March 2025, the Strait of Hormuz crisis has yet to have a negative impact on those categories. If anything, sales were up in both petrol and diesel relative to how they were tracking before the war kicked off. What's important to remember though is that these industries' sales numbers only count cars that were delivered to an owner or registered as a dealership demonstrator in that month. It is not necessarily an accurate representation of buyer sentiment. It simply shows us which cars were delivered. It's not the easiest thing to cancel an order for a car once you've already signed the contract. So it's fair to assume that the bulk of these petrol and diesel cars that were delivered across March were ordered well before this crisis kicked off, and definitely well before the extent of impact on fuel pricing became obvious. But even so, in terms of market share, both of these traditional combustion types were already trending down over the past 13 months. Buyer preference was clearly shifting away from them, so the impact of the fuel crisis is simply going to make the gradient of the line even steeper. Now, while conventional hybrid sales also got a boost last month, the market share for conventional hybrids didn't really move by a statistically significant amount. In fact, current hybrid market share is lower than it was for most of last year, and hybrid sales were substantially higher in November and December of 25 than they were in March of 26. Now, you can read that in a few different ways. One way is obviously to consider that hybrid market share is slowly being transferred over to electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. We'll get to plug-ins in just a second. But there's also another sort of product side that obviously impacts the overall hybrid sales figure, and that's the fact that the RAV4, the Toyota RAV4, has been in run-out for quite a while now. The new generation RAV4 is currently being launched right now as I record this, and deliveries of that are going to be starting from basically from May onwards. And once those RAV4s start rolling off the boats in big numbers, we're probably going to see a boost to hybrid market share back to its previous peak. But right now, at least for March, hybrid sales haven't been especially strong. Now, as with the previous generation, the new generation RAV4 is going to be a hybrid-only proposition, but this time around there's also going to be plug-in hybrids in the mix. That's a first for the RAV4 in this country, and it'll be interesting to see whether uptake is strong for the PHEV variants, especially because PHEVs were the other big winner in March, logging 8,215 sales, which I believe is the best monthly result for PHEVs ever. The end result is that they've taken 7.56% of market share, which is pretty much where EVs used to be. Now, again, the most likely explanation for this is a product-led one, because in Q1 of this year, BYD launched not one, but two very important plug-in hybrid electric vehicle models. One was the Sea Lion 8, which is expected to be a high-selling core model for them, as well as the BYD Sea Lion 5, which is, as I write this, Australia's most affordable plug-in hybrid. Now, also around the corner from BYD is the Seal 6, which will be available as a sedan and a wagon, and has a claimed range of 1,400 kilometers on a single tank and single charge. That's huge. BYD has also just expanded the Shark 6 range with a new cab chassis variant, as well as a 2-litre model which can tow up to 3.5 tonne, giving it the same on-paper capabilities as the diesel dual cabs that are no longer quite as appealing as they were before the Strait of Hormuz got shut. BYD has also committed to sending a literal boatload of new cars in our direction as a result of the fuel crisis. They want to make hay while the sun shines, so to speak, and they're doing so in a big fashion. I think 30,000 new cars are going to be landing in Australia over the next couple of months, and that is something like triple the usual volume that they ship to this country. So they're definitely out to try and capitalize on this fuel crisis. Also, Ford has announced the discounts on the plug-in petrol-electric version of the Ranger, as well as the all-electric Transit van. That's a direct response to the fuel crisis too, but also other car makers from Jack to Mitsubishi to Mazda to Toyota, Subaru, a whole bunch of car makers have a lot more, let's say, heavily electrified products, either fully electric or plug-in hybrid electric, on the way this year. Those vehicles were already in the pipe, it's just that their timing is impeccable. Basically, if it can plug into a wall outlet to charge up, buyers are going to be a lot more interested in that type of vehicle going forward, and all of the OEMs have come to that realization. I think it's really just the fuel crisis has accelerated that process. It was going to happen organically at some point in time, but now I think it's going to happen a whole lot sooner than most people expected. Now, bear in mind that the numbers I'm talking about here only concern new cars. The metrics for used cars are a little less visible, though there's already signs that stock of used EVs are being run down. According to Car Sales, which is the biggest auto classifieds in Australia, searches for EVs nearly tripled in March as motorists look for relief from high prices. Funnily enough, I'm actually in the process of hunting down an EV for my dad right now, and pretty much every used EV on my watch list has been sold in the past month. And some seriously unpopular stuff was on that list too, like Mazda MX-30 E35s and Mini Cooper Es. So expect residual values for EVs of all kinds to improve in the short to medium term. But not everyone is participating or able to participate in this EV gold rush. Though the diversity of choice in the EV and PHEV space has definitely improved in recent times and is going to get even better as this year winds on, the cost of living crisis is still an ongoing thing. And those who didn't have the free cash flow before this fuel crisis to purchase a new car are probably still in that same situation. There's also another chunk of people out there who simply don't have an electrified option in front of them that can do what their current car does. The most obvious example there are tradespeople who depend upon a diesel ute or a diesel van to get their particular job done, and the electrified options out there currently don't really fit the bill. Diesel, by the way, really does have the deck stacked against it right now. Long before this current fuel crisis kicked off, it was apparent that diesel would become a bit of a niche fuel, at least in the sort of passenger car, SUV, and light commercial vehicle space by 2040. And if you want to know the reasons why, do watch this mini documentary I put together on exactly why diesel cars are falling out of favor and will likely disappear over the next decade. I think you'll find it informative, and if you like this style of content, please do feel free to subscribe to this channel. I've got more coming. But how are you finding this situation? Has the fuel supply crisis changed your mind about putting an EV or a plug-in hybrid in your own driveway, or are you staying the course with petrol and diesel for now? Do let us know in the comments. I'm definitely interested in your point of view on this. So that's it for now. I'll follow this up in probably a few months' time once we've got a bit more sales data to work with and we can establish whether this is going to be a permanent change in buyer behavior or just a blip on the chart. But right now, I'll leave you with the understatement of the century by saying we live in interesting times. Thanks for watching.